Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And so I'd like to invite everyone to sign up for the retreat. If you haven't already, the retreat will be a time where we will all be filled with grace and tremendous light. It'll be a beautiful transmission. It'll be a very healing and awakening opportunity for all of you. So if you can come, we'd love to have you, and the whole thing will be recorded if the time zone doesn't work for you. So if the times don't work for you, session times. Okay. So yeah, I think there's just maybe one or two new people in the room here. So I'm going to offer a short teaching, and then we'll do group sharing, and we'll do questions at the end. Okay, very good. So today, one of the things I'd like to speak about is that Kundalini brings forth, for many of us, a great deal of sensitivity. And I'll just list off like some of the sensitivities that I've developed since my Kundalini woke up. And we'll have a little fun here. I'm sensitive to light, to touch, to sound, to chemicals, to supplements, to medication, to caffeine, to any kind of intoxicants, alcohol and kind of drinks and this type of thing. Of course, drugs and that type of thing. Sensitive to violence, sensitive to quick movements, and sensitive to relationships, sensitive to moods, to energies, to feelings. And so, let me flesh this out a little bit, because like at some point we say, oh my God, like this is crazy. Like, how are we going to function in this world? Because we live in a world where, so much is thrown in our face. Like I can remember when I went to India, as soon as I got off the plane, the air was so thick and dense with chemicals, like the air in India. We'd like to imagine India as this pristine country, but get off the plane and somewhere like Mumbai, and you could probably have every chemical toxin ever made is floating in the air that you're breathing. And so the thing with Kundalini is basically it takes your subtle energetic body. And for most people, like they walk around in this world, and let's imagine like their subtle energetic body is working at 1%. And when Kundalini starts to wake up in you, like you might get up to 50%, you might get up to 100%, where your subtle energetic body is highly attuned and sensitive to this world, to everything in this world. Now, this is one of the reasons why, like if you go visit a great master, they might not know you, but they can look at your body, they can scan your body, they can feel into your chakra centers, they can feel into your past lives, and they might just start speaking to you. They might answer your question without you even asking the question. My teacher used to do this to me all the time. I'd write down like 10 questions, and I'd go sit with him, Sunday morning, and he'd answer all 10 questions without me opening my mouth. And I was like, wow, like how can he do that? So when Kundalini is awake, it brings forth this gift of sensitivity. But the only way this sensitivity can be a gift is when it is balanced with an immense strength and groundedness. If we have sensitivity that's disconnected from strength, then we become a person who can't leave the house, can't function. And one of the questions I get a lot, is, hey, Craig, I have all this energy, I have all this sensitivity, and I cannot function. I can't go into work. Work is a toxic environment. My boss is toxic. The people there are toxic. My family's toxic. I can't go to the supermarket. The lights are too bright. And it's like, oh my God, like, how are we going to function in this world? So before we get into that, I want to speak about some of these sensitivities, because, the way the ego looks at a sensitivity is it looks at it as being, oh, I'm debilitated in this regard. And because I'm debilitated, I'm therefore a victim. And I can't function in this world, and life isn't fair. It's not right. There's no place for me. And it actually sends us further into egoic division because we can feel isolated and alone. Even something as silly as, I can remember, there's this ritual here in the United States where people drink coffee. Me, like, I can't drink a cup of coffee. If I drink a cup of coffee now at 10 a.m., I'll be awake at 4 a.m. tonight or tomorrow, however you say that. And so that's how sensitive I am to caffeine. If I have a sip of alcohol, I immediately have a migraine headache. And so, like, as a guy, and like all my friends, like, I should say all, but the majority of my old friends drink alcohol. And so, I have a great deal of sensitivity. So I can't have a sip of alcohol or I'll get a migraine. And so there's a lot of things that fall away. And sometimes these things will fall away gradually over time. Like, I can remember, this was many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when alcohol started to give me a hard time. I'd get a little headache, with it, and I wouldn't be able to sleep afterwards. But then it gradually increased to where I couldn't even have a sip of it. With light and sound, like, I need to pretty much sleep alone is very detrimental, on a relationship. And, when someone's like, hey, what the heck? Like, why do you sleep alone? And, do you not love me? And like, you can get ourselves in all kinds of trouble when we're super sensitive. When my Kundalini first woke up, no one could touch me because I'd go into convulsions. And again, like, this can get real crazy and real nutty. And if we're not grounded in a sense of strength, if we don't trust in the Kundalini, if we don't trust in the gift of sensitivity, then we can really get lost. Like, I could have went into a place like, oh my God, no one can touch me. And, I'm going to be this isolated hermit in the woods, and I can't function in the world, and I'll starve to death. Or, I could go into some crazy state of consciousness if I wasn't connected to this deep and profound sense of strength. So I'll talk a little bit more. I can remember once, like, medicine, like, just Western medicine doesn't really work with my body, with my nervous system. When I take anything, whatever the side effect is, like, I'll get it immediately. I took a baby aspirin last year because my mom was trying to help me with my long COVID. And, I immediately had internal bleeding. It's just like, this is stupid. And we're talking a baby aspirin, which is something, a lot of folks take every day. And I'm not saying this will be like this for everyone. I'm just using myself as an example. I can remember once I took an herbal supplement, like some ashwagandha, just an Indian herbal supplement. And, someone told me, like, it's a really good antioxidant and helps you with energy, because I was having some low energy at the time. And I took it, and, immediately my Kundalini just went through the roof as soon as I took it. And the translation for ashwagandha is racehorse. And it made my Kundalini run through me like a racehorse. In a positive sense, like, when we become more sensitive, we become much more intuitive. And so we can read situations more clearly. We can feel into others more clearly. And this is a great gift, but it can also be quite troublesome. If you've ever been to a psychologist, a counselor who had a big wound or big confusion or big shadow, and they tried to read into you and diagnose you, oftentimes they would start with a somewhat intuitive reading that was semi-accurate, and then that would mix with whatever their wound was, and that creates this perfect mess. So if we have sensitivity, but we have a big wound and a big shadow, often our sensitivity will mix with the wound and the shadow, and it will create disasters. And unfortunately, there's a lot of psychic people, like a lot of psychics. If you ever meet with a psychic or a card reader, you'll see, okay, like they're reading your tarot cards or whatever it is, reading your astrology, or they're just doing a psychic reading. And they might get some good, clear, intuitive hits, but then they mix it with their confusion because they're not grounded, they're not strong, and they're not clear in their consciousness. So when we have sensitivity that's just unbridled and it's mixing with whatever our egoic wound is, again, that creates a perfect storm. If you have sensitivity, but you are grounded, you're connected to your strength and to your power, you have a great deal of clarity, so you can see clearly through the vast space of awareness, you're connected to divine intelligence. Well, then the sensitivity can show up in the example I used with when you go visit Guruji, and he can tell you what happened in your previous incarnation that's making you trip in this incarnation, and help you to heal whatever wound that is, and to clear that karma, so that you can continue to awaken on this path of light and love. And so sensitivity, it's one of these things where it could be a great gift and a great curse. Now, I said the word that I was sensitive to speed. And, I'm not talking about a drug speed. I'm talking about moving quickly. So there's something that happens, like within a lot of people, when the Kundalini wakes up, when you're living in this present moment, when you are fully here, there's something that happens within the consciousness. Like if you're ever around a great master, you'll see they tend to move very slow. Very slow. Like if you're with a great Zen master, they're not going to be, hyperactive. They tend to move slow, and the movement is concise, and it's deliberate, it's intentional, it's in alignment with the truth. But there's times like whenever I have to rush, like this last year, I've had to rush. So I had to move twice in this last year, and it really threw off my Kundalini. And so if I have to get like my daughter to school real quick, like if my wife's sick or the car breaks or something and we have to rush, all of a sudden I notice that my Kundalini becomes really off, or, it gives me a hard time because it's used to moving in like a very slow, deliberate way. And so if I have to rush anywhere, the Kundalini can really quickly get steered to the right or to the left of the central channel. And it can move into like almost like a form of anxiety. And so let me see what else I wrote here, because I wanted to really speak about this. And people give me all kinds of questions around food in regards to Kundalini, and around food and diet. We spoke about this a couple classes ago. And the thing that I want to really reiterate here is when we're sensitive to a certain food, when we can feel into a certain situation, when we have intuition, when we are highly empathetic, it's important to take this information in. But it's also important to take this information in and take it into the realm of truth. We bring it like right into our central channel. And we ask our heart, we ask our hara, our lower belly chakra, how we shall respond. If you take sensitivity in and you ask your fearful ego, the response from your fearful ego will be much different than if you take that same sensitivity in and you listen to the sensitivity from the strength and the truth, like the divine intelligence, which resides in your hara. I'm going to give an example of this. So one of my teacher's teachers, Jakusho Kwong, he was a great Zen master. He is a great Zen master. And someone came on a retreat with him once. And the person who came on the retreat was addicted to cigarettes. And so at some point, the fella kind of like would go outside during the retreat and have a smoke break. And one day, Kwong saw him. Kwong used to smoke a long time ago. And Kwong, like during the retreat, he stepped outside. And in this place of just great silence, had a cigarette, just enjoyed a cigarette with one of the participants on the retreat. And one would ask, like why? Like, why is that? Like, was it just that Kwong wanted to have a cigarette, or just it reminded him of a cigarette? When someone asked Kwong, he said, well, he saw the guy out there alone. And he went to join him as an act of love and inclusivity. And I was so touched by that story that he joined him in an act of love and inclusivity. So sensitivity, when we're sensitive, it doesn't mean we need to go into the world and be afraid of everything. And so I can say this, that sometimes I'll join my friends, say at the brew pub. I can't drink, so I won't have a drink, but I'll have some bubbly water, maybe a slice of pizza. And I'll show up and I'll be in that karmic flow of all the difficulty and the heavy vibrations of the bar. But I show up and just meet with my heart to their heart, from heart to heart, meet in this space of love, meet in this space of community, and break bread together. And I can do that because I am rooted in strength, rooted in my power, because I'm grounded. And my sensitivity does not dictate my life. It gives me information which I receive. But I receive the information in the hara. In the hara. And so like I can say this, that over the last couple of days, I got in a little, I'm trying to buy a house, and I got in a little tiff with, some of the people doing the paperwork and this type of thing. And, I had to walk away from a contract, and, I had to give the person some really hard feedback, which they said they wanted, but they really didn't want it. They were looking for a way to kind of, weasel me back into the deal. And so last night, like I felt that person fighting with me, like all night long. I didn't sleep last night, like not, I don't know if I clocked any sleep last night. But because I'm sensitive, I received, I received the vibrations from the person who, I was having a little bit of a just human struggle with. I receive it because there's no stopping it from coming in. I'm so open. Everything comes into me. The same way, like on retreats, when I teach retreat, I often just don't sleep at all during the course of the retreat. And I feel everyone's energy on the retreat. And even if I do get a chance to sleep, like people will come into my dream world. And again, it's really hard. But the thing that happens when we have an ego is wired to listen to sensitivity and to react to it, which is often like to run with it, to run away from it, or to fight with it, or we just freeze and become like catatonic. But Kundalini isn't waking up your sensitivity for you to become more reactive, more fearful, or more, aggressive or catatonic. Kundalini is inviting you to wake up to your sensitivity and simultaneously to wake up to your strength. And then you can realize the gift, the great gift of sensitivity. Sensitivity is like a superpower of oneness, where you can feel into anything and everything. You experience anything and everything in you, around you, as you. You live in a way where there's no walls. But if you're going to live with no walls, you have to be strong. You have to be grounded. And so when I took, and to go back to my silly story about ashwagandha, when I took ashwagandha and sent my Kundalini through the roof, I had to ask, like, well, okay, what am I going to do here? I'm going to sit. I'm going to let this energy run. I'm going to let it burn off. I'm not going to be confused by it. I'm not going to be anxious. I'm not going to go into panic attack. I'm not going to go to the emergency room thinking I'm having a heart attack. Like, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I'm going to stay rooted and grounded, and I'm going to let this thing burn out of my system. I'm going to let it burn out of my system. And so then the same is true, like if we're in a relationship, and if our partner says anything, in this day and age, if someone raises their voice, it's like, oh my God, he's a narcissist and he's abusive. It's like, well, someone raises their voice, I'm going to stay rooted in my power, in my truth. I'm going to see that they're angry. Their anger is going to enter me. It's going to feel very uncomfortable. And I'm going to breathe through it. And I'm going to soften, and I'm going to trust in the resiliency and strength of my soul. And afterwards, I'm going to ask my heart, how do I respond? I'm going to respond with compassion. Now, if I was truly in an abusive relationship where someone's violent and this and that, like, of course, with sensitivity, I will know that I shouldn't be in the relationship before it gets violent. But if it does get violent, again, I'm just using like an extreme example here, because I'm connected to the strength and the resiliency of my soul, I know that I will fully be okay and outlive this experience. And then I have the strength to go forward, to leave, to pack my bags, to get out of my way, to grieve, to let go, and to create a new life. And so it's so important for us on the path not to be overwhelmed by sensitivity, not to be used by your sensitivity, not to allow the sensitivity to be steered in the direction of the fight or flight response. We want sensitivity to be directly plugged into the truth. Directly plugged into the truth. And the beautiful thing when sensitivity is directly plugged into the truth, your life can become very, extremely efficient. Extremely efficient. Extremely. And so I can say, just with a little bit of a smile, that this little tiff that I got in, with this, you're trying to purchase a home with the paperwork people, like they handed me a contract a couple months ago and I signed it. But as soon as they handed it to me, I knew, like my sensitivity just told me, like, don't sign that. But when I asked the person, I said, like, what does this mean? And they kind of, BS'd me a little bit. But then they said, oh, you can just terminate it at any point, and so basically they said, like, Craig, you have full power here. You can terminate this at any point. There'll be no problem. And with that, I was like, okay, all right, fine, I'll sign this thing. But I knew at that moment, like, don't sign this, Craig, like, don't. but I made the mistake, not listening. And so it just created a little bit of ego confusion in our life. And you'll find that more and more, like, the sensitivity will speak to you. And the more you listen, then you don't have to get into this little bit of trouble way down the lane. If you listen to the sensitivity, and again, I really want to clarify this, and then we'll move on to sharing time. We listen to sensitivity not from a perspective of fear. We listen to the sensitivity from a perspective of power. And this makes all the difference in the world. If you listen to your sensitivity from the perspective of fear, you'll never leave the house. You become, one of these people who go on retreats, and then you have to leave the retreat because other participants on the retreat use shampoo in their hair. And you have so much chemical sensitivity, you can't be around human beings who use soap. And I've been on retreats like that before. So I've been on actually a couple retreats when, there was real bold instructions: no perfumes, no, can't use these certain soaps. And I was like, my God, someone's gotten lost in their sensitivity. And I don't want to say that that's wrong, but more it's an invitation. It's like, hey, we need to come back into our body. And this is one of the great reasons I do this outrageous thing, 5 days a week. I go and I roll jujitsu. And, basically I do, literally hand-to-hand combat with other human beings in a sweaty, disgusting gym. Because it helps me become very strong, very grounded, very embodied. And the other beautiful thing, because most of us are not living by ourselves in a cave or living in an ashram, it is such a gift when we are in relationship, when we have families, when we have to have a job that we have to deal with other human beings, because it helps us to develop this strength to deal with life. And I hope this doesn't come off too harsh, but there's this power that really comes forward, which we need if we're going to live here on planet Earth, if we're going to function here on planet Earth. And Kundalini is very powerful and very sensitive. And when we bring these two things together, it is quite beautiful. People are often surprised at my range, where I can, open into the heaven realms. And I can also, hang out with guys who do MMA. I can hang out with, warriors and soldiers and people, combat veterans. And, I can, hang out with military personnel and police officers, people who have really harsh, heavy consciousness. It's because there's strength here. But I do admit that there's times when I really have to recharge. And so if we ask, well, how do we help with this? If we become overly sensitive, it's so important that you spend a lot of time also alone, recharging. It's important to spend time in water. That helps kind of cleanse the aura if we've been around heavy, dense vibrations. It's helpful to have access to nature, to the outdoors, to the ocean, to deserts, to mountains. It's helpful to receive body work, if you've taken on just too much karma, too much pain. It'd help, to go in and receive some healing, nurturing support. It's helpful to come to something like this, where the vibrations here help to clear out, some of the heavier, denser energies of planet Earth.